Alright, I think I'm going to put you just there, because I don't want to have to hold you this whole time. Another thing that came to mind, that I just remembered, one of the things my sister was saying was that there's this case going on in the news at the moment about some kind of baby who I think is on some kind of life support or something, and she was saying, how is it in my self-interest to care? Well, this was one of her worst arguments. But how is it in my self-interest to care about this baby? I don't care about this baby at all. But I know I care because it's right for me to care, because or something like that. Anyway, it seems so obvious to me, but if you just consider the opposite. So let's say, instead of acting like it is in your self-interest to care, or at least present yourself as if you care. Because if you imagine, let's say it comes up in conversation, someone says, have you heard about this baby case that's going on at the moment? And your response instead was, I don't give a shit about some stupid baby, I don't know it, I don't give a shit. Do you think that's going to be more or less in your self-interest than if you were to behave in the more traditional way of, I don't know what to think, but it's a real shame that, because it could be something like that. Anywho, that's just my immediate reaction to such a thing. I think what I'm going to have to do is pause this every now and again to read and then respond. Okay, so the first one they're going for is psychological egoism, and the kind of main example they are citing here, and this is on some plato.stanford.edu. The main example they're giving is the jumping on a grenade, soldier jumping on a grenade to sacrifice himself. And they rightly say, so there are a few things that could explain it. One, that it would actually be worse for him. He would, because he'd go into the negative, he'd get his area under the curve would become negative. Well, not his full area under the curve, but he'd start to be subtracting from his positive area under the curve if he were to carry on living by not sacrificing himself. Secondly, he can be wrong. So it would be better for him not to do it, but our intuitions are such that so that's kind of I would kind of be admitting a slight flaw in psychological egoism, but I think it would be still in accordance with the way egoism would have evolved. Your genes would still kind of probably increase in the likelihood of being transferred because your germline. I'd be interested to know whether people without any children are more or less likely to act selflessly, sacrifice themselves, sacrifice their life, and also whether having any siblings and things like that affect it. So that's another possible one. It could be just your genes acting. Well, not consciously, obviously, but you know what I mean. That kind of behaviour would have evolved to be better than preferable to the others. And the other one was... See what happens when I don't write them down. Could just be wrong. Oh man, hang on. Bear with. Maybe I just didn't say it. I think it's just... Yeah, he could just be wrong. Oh, maybe I did say that. Oh, fuck, man. That's stupid. Oh, yeah, that's it. And the other point is, obviously they're talking about cases where people already have done it. But in the case of discussing it, it's almost certainly going to be in your self-interest to say that you are the kind of person who would sacrifice himself in such a scenario, because it would work out better for you. And to actually believe it would work out even better for you. So if you believe that you were the kind of person who were to do it, then it probably is better for you than if you were just to lie, because you're more likely to be convincing, obviously, if you're telling the truth. And also, it will give you to believe it allows you to believe a good thing about yourself, which will work out well for your, self-esteem and all those things that people don't like anymore. Self-esteem, well, just a word that is good for describing why it would be good. Another thing I just came up with that is also quite pretty far-fetched, but given our history of the belief in the supernatural, and especially things like life after death, that could certainly carry over into the minds of even an atheistic soldier who somehow has retained some belief in the possibility of divine retribution. Well, not divine retribution, but life after death, and that the act would work out for them at some point in the future. Also, things like, so more on the being wrong thing. It's more about whether they believe it's in their self-interest. So they may believe that it's going to be better for them to jump on the grenade, but again, they could be fucking wrong. But they could also be right. It's just we're trying to find the patterns of things which are more likely to be right in most cases than other things. Okay, I think I'm just going to skip through the psychological egoism one because I think I've just tackled all of these before. One sec. Okay, so in this series of experiments by this Batson chap and all that, they try to individually disprove kind of each possible defence of psychological egoism, and I'll give them a little bit. I mean, they kind of done better than nothing, but I think it's more a matter of which genes and therefore which behaviours would have been more likely to result in the self-preservation of those genes. So things like allowing high empathy people, changing whether they believe the acts they're doing are in secret or not, the altruistic acts they're doing are in secret or not, you'd think would reduce the amount of helping they did, right? They reduce their altruistic behaviour because surely it's less likely to be in their self-interest. But from a genetic standpoint, it would be far more likely to be in your favour or in your gene's favour to actually act in all cases as such, because in the cases where you think it's possible to be mistaken, then maybe at some point something evolved that did behave in such a way as to only do it when it believed it was being it was acting in its self-interest, and then not so much when it wasn't. Well, it only takes a few instances where you get caught out by that for it to be worse than to actually do it all the time. I don't want to go on about the genes thing too much because people easily get confused and think that you're arguing for the genes are conscious and they're acting in their self-interest. It's not quite right. It's kind of you're trying to align your self-interest with what your genes are kind of programming you to do, right? So they can be a help or a hindrance. Most likely are going to be a help, but there are some cases which. So I'm a stronger advocate of ethical egoism, my version of ethical egoism, than I am for psychological egoism, because I think we're very often we don't actually act in our self-interest, even though one, we should, and two, we are mistaken about what it would be in our self-interest to do. Okay, so there's a case here. They're kind of fighting between altruistic and egoistic reasons for child rearing. And the kind of egoistic standpoint would apparently be that by raising the child well, you're kind of reducing the risk that you're going to cause yourself pain, or some emotional pain or something like that. I don't know, man. I mean, it's just area under the curve, right? Having a healthy relationship with a child can probably drastically increase your area under the curve. Whether you're aware that you're doing it in that selfish way or not, I mean, is kind of. I mean, people do behave abhorrently towards their children. So whether that is in support of or against my claim, it just depends on the case. Oh man. I just don't see the distinction between the egoistic and the altruistic. I really think that in almost every case, being altruistic will work out better for you in the long run. So yeah, I just don't think they're mutually exclusive. There we go. And whether we're smart enough. So this is something that kept coming up in my argument with my sister, is that people are too stupid, right? We all are too stupid to actually know what is going to be the best, most likely thing to be in our self-interest in each instance. So we use wisdom that has evolved with us over time, which is what I think wisdom is, that informs us as to what is most likely to work out in our self-interest or not in the long run. So things, having even fucking the bloody 10 commandments is better than nothing, right? Because if you were to just go into the world, if we were blank slates and we went out into the world, the odds of us doing well in that world would be terrible unless we were to, over time, develop some kind of fucking rules like 10 commandments, right? It's better than nothing. That's all you have to admit. And I'm not saying it's the best either. It's definitely not the fucking best. Jesus Christ. It's terrible. It's fucking dreadful. But it's better than nothing. So, just deal with that. Yeah? Just deal with that. Okay, the first thing I'm noticing about this, we're now to ethical egoism. The first little thing I'm noticing here is that they say, it is unlikely that this argument proves that ethical egoism generates all of the standard duties to others, for the argument depends on the ability of others to cooperate with me or attack me should I fail to cooperate. Well, no, it doesn't. Because it's not you're never in a closed system, so your actions in one scenario we're not smart enough to behave like that. We just don't have enough information, and it would actually be probably less in our self-interest if we were to use up all our cognitive ability. You'd develop paranoia, right? And to be constantly assessing whether you can get away with not behaving altruistically, or whatever word you want to use, as part of a cohesive society, right, in each scenario, is worse for you than just to behave as if you are, right? And it's even worse for you to not believe that you are. Okay? Man. The risk of trying to get away with something is large, and it doesn't mean people don't do it. And I reckon if many people who once realised ethical egoism would probably try to more than they do now, but I wouldn't even recommend that. I don't even strongly recommend everyone adopt ethical egoism as their thing. I think it would be probably better to go to the point, only go as far as utilitarianism or whatever the best moral theory is that's going to work out in your self-interest. But as long as just the smart people can recognise that the reason we're doing that is because of ethical egoism. Okay. Again, in the case of the drowning person, I just struggle. I will acknowledge that you can probably contrive a way in which that it really would be in my self-interest not to save that drowning person, and in which case I would not save that drowning person. But in almost every instance, it's going to be better for me to save that drowning person, and therefore I should do it for so many reasons, even for my own conscience, which factors into it. Man. Look, it's so complex, it's so incredibly complex what would actually be in your self-interest, that the best we can do is use wisdom that develops over thousands of years to advise how we should behave, right? I'm just going to stop there again because I'm just going to go over the same stuff. Okay, this famine versus opera thing, I just don't know what they're on about. I may profit, do they mean literally profit more, as in money? In which case, no, wrong. I'm not saying at any point. I refuse to synonymise wealth with self-interest and well-being. Wrong. it's the ramifications of both things are so multifaceted and vast that it can't say that. You just can't say, unless, okay, look, but this is the thing, you have, in these cases they always say if, right? If, and then they make this assumption that this thing is better, right? Once you do that, if you say if and then say the thing that I'm arguing for or against, and then if, and then just assume, right? That's the whole bit. The whole bit is whether something is actually in self-interest or not. So if you're just saying it is, and then giving an example of something that seems so counterintuitive that it probably wouldn't be, is obviously going to... okay, I'll just grant it. What if it really would be more in my self-interest to do the opera thing over the African thing? Well, then do the fucking opera thing. But in almost every scenario, the thing which intuitively seems thingy is probably more likely to be. But it doesn't mean our intuition is always correct, right? We can have wrong intuitions, but that one, which is kind of conventional wisdom, is more likely to be right than the other one. So there we go. Okay, now they're getting somewhere. They're talking about maybe it's better to convert from egoism to some other one, so that you're actually acting in a way that doesn't reveal your egoism, kind of, or doesn't infer the negative aspects of people suspecting that you're an egoist or whatever. And then they say there could be cases which would be, by adopting the other one, you'd be missing out on a possible egoistic gain. Safer and seemingly feasible to remain an egoist while cooperating in most cases. Well, either it is or it isn't, right? I don't know at the moment. My suspicion is strongly that it is better for you to adopt some other moral theory. I am not sure whether you have to completely eradicate from your memory that the reasoning that, it's on an egoistic basis, and I don't think you should. I just really don't think you're going to be smart enough to assess whether you're ever in one of those situations where it's not going to be playback or something. Because, again, it's the most complex game theory problem there is. So, whatever. Just something that I've realised I didn't mention. Well, I think I didn't mention earlier. In the case of the high empathy individuals acting altruistically in what they believe to be secrecy and what wasn't secrecy. There's also, that comes back to the thing of believing yourself to be that kind of person or not, and whether that's in your self-interest or not. So believing yourself to be someone who acts altruistically, regardless of whether you think you're doing it in secret or not, is different from being the kind of person who acts more altruistically when they believe they're being watched than others. Self-perception. So there we go. Just while I'm doing this, I think the biggest reason to understand egoism in all its forms is that once you acknowledge it's true, so to speak, you're kind of, it gives you a reason to accept another moral theory. It's very hard to accept any other moral theory other than to appeal to which is what they're talking about here, appeal to our intuitions, right? The way we assess a moral theory is whether it's in accordance with our intuitions, and whether it fits the examples we give. I think the only reason, every time you do that, you're always appealing to your ethical ego, to your egoism. So it just underpins all moral theory. It really does. So once you acknowledge that, and you have a reason for doing all the things, for living itself, it's hard to see how it can't be true. It's the only counter, and I've said it before, it's the only cure to nihilism. Because the more we realise that all that is all there is, and all that could be is all that could be. I'm not saying all that there is that we can see is all that there is. We're always seeing a perception, and there's definitely more to the world than what we can see. Science will help reveal some of that, but not all of that. But that is what I'm talking about when I say all that there is. All that actually is. Okay. And whether there's a God there or not, it doesn't really matter. Because even if there was a God and he had some divine plan for you, that wouldn't really matter to you unless it mattered to you. Which is the ethical and which is the egoistic aspect. Right? It only matters to you in as much as it actually matters to you. So nihilism doesn't quite get you there. It doesn't do anything with it. It just says because there's seemingly nothing, and even if there was something, then we might as well just do nothing with it. Whereas egoism tells you no matter what there is or is not, you're always trying to do the same thing with it, which is to use it in some way. Oh, that's bad. No, that's the kind of thing that would try to get people against it. It's not use it, but you're always trying to get your self-interest up in the broadest sense possible. Yeah, whatever. Okay, this G.E. Moore guy with his X is my good and that business. I mean, whether it's better for other people to realise ethical egoism or not, it's open to debate, but I would certainly say that it almost certainly is better to understand why the moral theories we're endorsing are better for us, and why it's better to have a cohesive society, and why it's better to have symbiotic relationships. And I just don't think that it might be better. So there's an element of pragmatism involved. It might be better if the whole world believed that they should be acting in your self-interest somehow, but I just think pragmatically it would be impossible to achieve that, and it would be worse for you to try to achieve that than to achieve the more practical aim of having everyone understand that they're acting in their own self-interest, and the best way to achieve that is to act in what you believe to be the self-interest of others also, and to try to solve the game theory problem of what is the greatest good for everyone. Okay, I'm starting to just kind of lose interest now. So kind of talking about moralists, and I think the thing to take away is that the reason you want anyone to be a moralist, okay, look, if you're trying to convince someone to be a moralist, I think what you need to acknowledge that you're actually doing, and the only way they're going to accept it, is if they realise, or they don't even have to realise it, but if they're some definition of believe that it's in their best interest to do so. Be a moralist, whatever that means. Have morals, I don't know. Just be a good person, because it will benefit you, okay? Do it for your own sake. There you go, pretty simple. That's my stance on ethical egoism. Okay, this final paragraph here, talking about how one could then, if one wished, argue for ethical egoism from rational egoism and the plausible claim that the best moral theory must tell me what I have most reason to do. Yeah, I guess it's kind of what I'm going on about a little bit. We'll see if they get this right. Okay, this arbitrariness claim, I think it just comes from Descartes with I think therefore I am. It's not I think therefore I think you think therefore you are. It's all we can truly know. It's the bloody hard problem of consciousness. It's all those things start into one. There's another thing they brought up. What was it? Instrumental theory. Supposedly you have strong preferences, and for some reason they're not going to be in accordance with egoism, rational egoism. I don't know. I just don't see why that would be the case. So the B and C, A, B and C brain splitting thing, I think just cloning would have been better. I don't know. Or, well, I guess to get rid of the identity thing. It's just the halving brain thing doesn't really work. I've talked about this before, how as soon as the clone is created, it becomes two individuals. So, yeah, they kind of say it. At that point, they'd be caring for themselves just as much as they were before, and not for the other one as much, but probably, I mean, the situation would determine how much you would. And Parfit, I hope I read my note. I wrote so many notes on, because this was the first thing he tackled in Reasons and Persons. I wrote a whole lot of notes about that. One of the things he seemed to do was equate wealth with, or money acquisition with, being in self-interest. And there were just a few things which I didn't agree with, so hopefully I've already done those. If not, I guess I'll just have to read my notes at some point. Alright, and that's the end. And now this is too bloody long, so it's probably not going to let me send it. Great. Anyway, I just don't think I don't think the error in the curve thing was ever undermined. Some nice little things which muddy the waters a bit, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just too stubborn and steadfast in my ways. I tried, I guess. Maybe I didn't try. Maybe I did. I don't know. I'll just leave it there because it's getting pretty bloody long.